Test. Okay. Good morning. So, friends, have a question for you. Yesterday, I misspoke, and I said that we were going to talk about the binding of Isaac today, which is the lectionary text for this coming Sunday that Pete is thankfully not preaching on. What I have actually in the list is the lectionary text for a week from this coming Sunday. And so we can talk about that one where Abraham sends some folks to pick up a bride for Isaac, or we could talk about the binding of Isaac and all the implications of that. So the binding of Isaac is when God says, "Take your son Isaac, whom you love, and go off to this mountain and sacrifice him." Yeah, exactly. What? So it has lots of interesting theological implications. The sending folks off to, the people back in Ur to get a bride for Isaac is sort of like, okay. So it's your call. I think you heard what I would prefer to talk about, but
What are you going to talk about on the 9th?
on the 9th, I'm going to talk about the Song of Solomon. Yeah, Song of Songs is going to be, so, yeah, we'll talk about that, but the first one that we'll talk about, so we have, what we normally do is take about half an hour to talk about the reading that I'm not preaching on, and then half an hour to talk about the reading that I am preaching on. And so I'm sort of putting out there, which would you prefer for that first, half an hour or 20 minutes?
We don't care.
You don't care? Okay. Well, then I'm going to change. So we're going to go ahead.
If you do the one that's for today, that's right, we don't have Bible study this coming Monday, so we.
Correct. Right, because I'm in Texas sweating like crazy. Okay.
He wants us to think of it in that way.
Yeah.
That's why he keeps,
Yeah, well, it's me pre-suffering so that I'm whinging less while I'm there. Yeah, exactly. That's my hope. That's my hope. And so anyway, so friends, why don't we plan that we will do Genesis 22, 1 through 14. So that's where we're going to start today. But before that, let's go ahead and open with prayer. God, we give you thanks that your providence surrounds us, that you fill our lives with many good things and offer us the chance to see you around us. Help us with our eyes to see you, with our hearts to feel you, with our ears to listen for you, in the words of those around us, in the movements of your Spirit, in those little pieces of this world that show and point to you in all of your glory. Help us to respond with joyful hearts, that we might help others see you present as well. We ask this in Christ's name, and all God's people said, Amen. Okay, so we're going to look at Genesis 22, 1 through 14. And after these things, God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham, and he said, Here I am. He said, Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains that I shall show you. So Abraham rose early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, and his own son Isaac. He cut the wood for the burnt offering and set out and went to the place in the distance that God had shown him. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place far away. Then Abraham said to his young men, "Stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. So the 2 of them walked on together. Isaac said to his father Abraham, "Father." And he said, "Here I am, son." He said, "The fire and the wood are here, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering?" Abraham said, "God himself will provide the lamb for a burnt offering, my son." So the 2 of them walked on together. When they came to the place that God had shown him, Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand and took the knife to kill his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, "Abraham, Abraham." And he said, "Here I am." He said, "Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me." And Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in a thicket by its horns. Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, "The Lord will provide." As it is said to this day, "On the mount of the Lord it shall be provided." First thoughts? Now you see why I thought this was more interesting. God was certainly testing Abraham. Yeah, there was definitely a test here. You waited all this time for this, child to come. You're over 100 now, and suddenly, hey, it's time to go get rid of this. Time to sacrifice. It doesn't make any sense. Sorry, it's just a little bit loud coming in there.
I find it interesting that Abraham, if Isaac is old enough to ask Father about where to sacrifice, that it doesn't say that he protested or anything.
Yeah, it doesn't say that Isaac protested, that he's getting, tied up and not protesting, but he's old enough to say, "What's going on? Where's the animal? Where's the ram?" So, yeah. What else? God tell you, this is troubling text. That God would say, "Okay, waited all this time, here's this child. Now I'm going to test you. And no, you're gone. I mean, you're getting rid of it. You're killing it."
Hasn't he already tested them by asking them to leave? I mean,
There's been testing and testing and testing. Leave your people, go someplace that you've never been. Yeah, this feels really like a problem.
send your one son out into
Yeah, send one of your sons with his mother out into the wilderness where they could easily die. Here's the other one. Stick a knife into his heart and cut the throat or whatever. Yeah, no, this is not comfortable. And Abraham doesn't question either. Abraham says, "Okay, yeah." So here's one interpretation of this. In the Middle East, in this time, human sacrifice was not unknown. I mean, it happened in different cultures. And so we can interpret this as God saying human sacrifice is not okay. As sort of like, okay, here's, give up the, people have been sacrificing others to gods, and here we're getting a clear indication, no, it's not okay. So that would be one interpretation. Another interpretation is, where is your loyalty to God? How does God provide? That to me is problematic in that, suddenly we have God being bloodthirsty and demanding ultimate loyalty when yeah, that's been pumping recently and hasn't for a long time. I have to talk to Don about that. But it puts this question of, if God does provide, why do we need to even go through the motions of this? The other part is, when you read this, do you hear echoes of another story? Yeah, absolutely. This has echoes of the crucifixion in it. The crucifixion, of Jesus' crucifixion. Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on his son Isaac. The crossbeam of the cross was laid on Jesus to carry it. The one going to the sacrifice was the one carrying it. God will provide the Lamb. Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything, for now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. God does not withhold God's son, God's only son. And so there's some parallels here that provide sort of that foreshadowing of what happens with Jesus. So we can talk about, the idea of the context of the ancient Middle East and say, okay, this story shows, while there might be that expectation for human sacrifice is not okay. And that becomes a theme throughout the Old Testament. As they're dealing with, encountering other cultures that, do practice human sacrifice, they're very clear this is not okay. And so this becomes sort of that story that tells, no, we don't do that.
Why would God then command him to do something that's a sin in the first place?
Why would God command Abraham to do something that's a sin in the first place? That's where this text becomes really problematic. I mean, God is saying, so I think that's why there is that first verse in chapter 22, after these things God tested Abraham. People who are telling the story are trying to figure out, how does this fit? How does this work? Because they know it happened, and so that, after these things God tested Abraham. They're saying this becomes a test to see Abraham's loyalty. But that feels like editorializing. It feels like the people that have been telling the story, Moses, who's supposedly writing this down, they're saying, okay, this was a test. That's why this happened. Because they have to figure out how this story works in. And so thinking of this as a test, that God's testing Abraham, it softens the blow just a little bit, because it indicates God never meant for Isaac to actually be sacrificed.
Well, it's pretty obvious that it's a test.
Mm-hmm.
What else could it be?
Right. I mean, it's definitely that test, but this kind of test feels very cruel to us. I mean, asking, sacrifice your child, you have to choose, God or the child that you've been longing for. It's really hard. It's really uncomfortable. And so while we can sit back here comfortably and say we know the rest of the story, thinking about putting ourselves in Abraham's shoes and the emotions there. Now, We do hear Abraham say, God will provide, it's okay, you know. Now, God will provide could also be that God has already provided this child. You know, that God was the one that brought them Isaac. Yeah, you know, it's that awful, I brought you into this world, I can take you out. What parent really says that? Yeah, I mean, we can easily say that God has been with me all this time. God's not really going to follow through. So I can, in confidence, go through with this. It still doesn't feel good.
Isaac seems to be taking this all very calmly, though.
Both of them are taking it very calmly. I would be apoplectic. I would be on the ground having I would be beside myself.
What does it all mean?
And that's why I pointed out, here are the parallels. For Christians, at least, we listen to this and we say, this is that precursor, that foretaste, the foreshadowing of Christ on the cross. That Christ becomes the sacrifice that wipes out all sins. That Christ shows love and obedience and mercy in ways that we can't comprehend. And because he's fully God, he's able to be that lamb that takes away the sins of the world. Instead of that need for continual animal sacrifice to expiate sin, Christ dies and is risen to show that, to atone for, to bring us back to being one with God. At one, atone, same word.
Everything again is predetermined.
Yeah, everything is predetermined here. This is why Calvin was so easy to say, yes, there is this predestination that while there is human free will, it's limited, that God already knows where things are going to go. And so, yeah.
Along that thinking, God creates man and he knows he's going to be sinful.
God creates man and knows that man's going to be sinful. Well,
Creates something with that knowledge.
well, and so that becomes, another question. If God knows all, was this all part of God's plan? Marty, go ahead.
I'm just posing this as a question. If we are created by God, and if we know that we belong to God, then did he understand that his child was a child of God and that he was willing to give him back to God?
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about it that way, that, all life comes from God, all life returns to God, all are children of God, and therefore, sacrificing Isaac is simply returning that life to God. However, God seems to be one who provides and cares. And so there could also be, well, if God has already done this so far, what more could God do? What other, is there another son coming? Or is God going to raise this child from the dead? Or who knows? And so that becomes the question mark here of how it's happening.
So if Abraham would not have followed, if he wouldn't follow through with it, he would have sinned.
If Abraham hadn't followed through with this, he would have sinned. He would have shown the lack of trust in God, which I would think would be. But if he had followed through all the way with it, he also would have sinned. I mean, it's sort of this really narrow path, really narrow bridge.
So if he didn't trust God, it's a sin, but it's no worse than gossiping about your neighbor. So what's the difference?
Right. Remember, we do say sin is sin is sin.
That would be, make it easy to rationalize.
Oh, yeah. There's lots of easy ways to rationalize not following through with this or doing something different. I mean, and yeah, we end up, gossiping. We end up doing all kinds of stuff every single day, and we justify it. And so this story is, in my opinion, is less about sin, and the point is more about God's providence. It becomes about how God cares for God's people and God provides what's needed. So if we're really focusing on that idea of the providence, because that last verse of 14, so Abraham called the place, the Lord will provide. As is said today, on the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. That God is the one providing what is needed at that time. God provided the ram. God provided the burnt offering, the sacrifice that shows loyalty, that shows devotion, that is used to, pay for sin and wrongdoing.
Seems like a cruel way to make that point.
It seems like a cruel way to make that point. I agree. I fully agree that this is really a hard passage. How do you deal with, so we can take some positives away from this of God does not, look for human sacrifice. We can take away the idea that, that there's faithfulness and trust on Abraham's part, that there is the foreshadowing of Christ's death and resurrection. And we're still left with a lot of discomfort, a lot of things that just, why is this here? Why is this happening this way? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't, add up to the God that we seem to understand and know through Jesus. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it. It pushes us a little bit. Marty?
Well, a lot of things happen in life that you question. I'm thinking of when my husband died, but he also, after he died, he provided me with a lot of support, from family, from friends, just all these things that happened afterward. I believe that it was time for my husband to go, but it's still a really hard time to let go of someone like that. And I kind of associate this with if you just let God provide, you will.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it wasn't as bad for me as it was for Abraham.
Right. Yeah, so there definitely are points in our lives that hardship comes along, that we experience loss, that we experience things that try us. And so we can take some hope from Abraham saying God will provide. And you're saying you've seen that, where with Jean's death, God provided through the people around you, through the family, through the care and support and comfort that came. And so yes, we can take that. Yeah, and so what I'm saying is that with this passage, we can take some good stuff away from it, and it still leaves us. There's still discomfort with it. And so I'm just pointing that out, and I don't know how to resolve it. There are some folks that will come along and say, "Oh, well, it's just Abraham showing his faithfulness, and Abraham knew all along this wasn't going to happen." I'm not convinced about that. It's still uncomfortable. It's too simple, and so we need to live with that discomfort and puzzle with it. But again, one of the things I hope that everyone here is taking away is that we sit with these uncomfortable things because it pushes us to understand God in a different way. And sometimes we can see that happen in the world around us where lots of bad things happen and we aren't quite sure what's going on. It wasn't any different in biblical times. There were still things that happen that people aren't sure why it happened and what's going on, but we can still come to the point, back to that point, that we can say God is still here providing, even if we don't fully understand it. Richard, you had something a few minutes ago.
It's just, the whole, it's hard to imagine this whole episode, really. So, I don't know. Hard to imagine.
Yeah, it is hard to imagine.
Obviously, Abraham believed,
Yeah,
and I guess it bodes that we believe as well. But
yeah, the belief is great, and it's still uncomfortable. It's still very uncomfortable because who of us who would, if we were walking knowing what we were going to do with our child, and the child's asking these questions, how are you going to keep it together? I couldn't. But there's something else. There's something going on. Patty?
Did other people in the town where they were from, were they aware of this?
No, I mean this was so. I mean when we listened to it, what happened is Abraham heard from God. God said, "Go sacrifice to the place that I'll tell you." Abraham loaded up the wood on the donkey, took 2 servants and Isaac, and they went off to this spot, a ways away. So, they thought, okay, they're going to find something along the way, pick up a sheep, something, along the way that they're going to sacrifice. Because, that's what Abraham says, that we're going to go to a sacrifice at a place that God has told us. And so, it's just when there's no sheep forthcoming that it raises questions for Isaac.
you were talking about sacrificing, human sacrifice, as well as animal sacrifice back in those days.
Yep.
This was always asking for something, though. I'm going to offer you this, give me something.
So yes, when we listen to further on in Exodus and Leviticus and Deuteronomy, we hear about the prescribed sacrifices that are supposed to occur in the temple, and so some of it is a grain offering and thanksgiving for what's happened. Others, when you have because of the plagues of Egypt, the last one, the death of the firstborn. God says all firstborn are dedicated to me. So when someone has their firstborn son, I think it's just son. It might be firstborn child, but you're supposed to go to the temple and sacrifice, some animal in exchange for the life of the firstborn. Then you have sacrifices to expiate sin. The Passover lamb sacrifices in remembrance of that event.
But
So
all this sacrificing that was going on, this was Jewish,
yeah,
I guess we call it tradition.
yes, and
Human sacrifice was never really
human sacrifice was never part of Jewish tradition.
right.
But it's happening in other cultures in this area, in this time. I mean, you have, workers on the pyramid sacrificed when a pharaoh dies. You have, other sacrifices happening in the area of Mesopotamia. So human sacrifice is not something unknown. Because remember, this is generations before Moses.
It's ironic it was even held all over the world.
Yeah.
You find it among the Mayan.
Yeah, human sacrifice happened all over in Central America. It happened in Europe, in prehistory. So, yeah. So,
Mentality.
Well, I mean, it's sort of like, okay, we'll sacrifice one for the good of the many to appease the gods, but yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to us in this day. But with superstition, with unknown forces, well, maybe we need to do this, that, or the other thing. You wonder how this even got into the Bible. Well, again, these are stories that are told around the campfires.
Abraham won't have to tell somebody this.
Or Isaac. I mean, Abraham or Isaac would have to tell the story.
Well, it depends. How old was Isaac?
Well, I mean, if he's old enough to say, "Where's the sheep for the sacrifice?" That, I mean, he's old enough to understand something. And again, like I mentioned yesterday, this story is repeated in the Quran, but it's Ishmael, not Isaac, who is taken out to be sacrificed. And God again intervenes and says no.
Could
Yeah.
this also be that trust me in all things, even though you don't know what the end result is going to be? Put your trust in me, and it may not work out necessarily the way we think we would like it to work out, but it is part of God's plan.
Yeah, I think that is one of those takeaways, that God's providence is there. So trust God in all things, and things will work out. So yes, I think that's one of the takeaways from this passage. But again, I mean, I think there's several takeaways that still don't leave us feeling comfortable with it. So after that, let's go to more uncomfortable stuff. Let's turn over to the Song of Songs, Song of Solomon, and we are in chapter 2, verses 8 through 13. So the Song of Songs, or Song of Solomon, what? Chapter 2, verse 8 is the starting point. Song of Songs, Song of Solomon, is another book in the Bible that Christians aren't really sure what to do with. Because it's well, listen, and then we can talk about it more. The voice of my beloved, look, he comes, leaping upon the mountains, bounding over the hills. My beloved is like a gazelle or a young stag. Look, here he stands behind our wall, gazing in at the windows, looking through the lattice. My beloved speaks and says to me, arise, my love, my fair one, and come away. For now the winter is past, the rain is over and gone. The flowers appear on the earth, the time of singing has come, and the voice of the turtle dove is heard in the land. The fig puts forth its figs, and the vines are in blossom. They give forth fragrance. Arise, my love, my fair one, and come away. So, this is God speaking to the soul, isn't it? This is Christ speaking to your soul, talking to you, arise, come away. This says a human is an animal. Yeah, no, this is love poetry. This is love poetry, pure and simple. And this is the reason they chose this is it's pretty tame. There's points that things are said that there's one place that says, our sister, you come for our sister, but she has no breasts. And, the man compares her breasts to a turtle dove's. And, he has legs the size of cedars of Lebanon. And, her teeth are as white as sheep coming up out of the water. I mean, there are points that it gets a little bit steamy. You just have to be willing to read it in such. It's not pornographic, but it's definitely, yeah, it's R-rated. It's not X-rated, it's R-rated. It's not NC-17.
So how come it wound up here?
How did it wind up here? How did it wind up here? Everyone thought Solomon was so great, yeah. Well, and there's questions whether it was even Solomon who wrote this. But one of the things that so it was there in the Hebrew Scriptures. It's there, alongside the Psalms, the Proverbs. I mean, and so this is some of the writings that people said, yes, the Hebrew people said this is part of the canon. And what I would say is it recognizes human love is indeed sacred. Human love, human passion, human connection to one another, that special sense of a lover is not profane, it's divine. The sense of connection that we have one with our partner is something that can open up the divine to us.
Why did it go on all the way through with the 14, 15, 16, and closing with 17, where in 16 it says, "My beloved is mine and I am his"?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually
Yeah,
a verse that Tracy and I used in our wedding, and that was actually the verse on my engagement ring, Ani Ladodi Vadodi Li.
I mean, it's so
Is
beautiful until the day breathes and the shadows flee.
Mhm.
My beloved, I think it's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Christians along the way have not been sure what to do with this, quite honestly, because it does have that passion, that, some, veiled explicitness. And so early Christians said, okay, what this is it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor for, the entire book is a metaphor for Christ and Christ's love for the soul. The soul is a female. And so Christ loves our souls, and this is that sense of connection. Yeah, I don't buy it. This is truly about that sense of human connection. Now, there are definitely points that it's a little bit racy, a little bit weird in that, look, there he stands behind our wall, gazing through the windows, looking through the lattice. Okay, we got a stalker here. That's verse 3. Look, there he stands behind our wall, gazing in at the windows, looking through the lattice. I mean, it's, he's coming, he's, peeking and,
The defense attorney could use that for.
yeah. No, I don't think so. But there is still this sense of love, of passion, of connection. Because it's not saying that it's, off in a way, that I don't like it. It's not comfortable.
There's a sense of honesty here.
There is absolutely a sense of honesty. So,
You do some nutty things when you're alone.
yep. Yeah, so if we look at chapter 3, verse 1, upon my bed at night, I sought him whom my soul loves. I sought him, but found him not. I called him, but he gave no answer. I will rise now and go about the city, in the streets, and in the squares. I will seek him whom my soul loves. I sought him, but found him not. The sentinels found me as they went about in the city. Have you seen him whom my soul loves? Scarcely had I passed them when I found him whom my soul loves. I held him and would not let him go until I brought him into my mother's house, into the chamber of her that conceived me. So there's that longing, that desire, that one that your soul loves. Go find him and stay, and hold on to him until you're able to go back and be together. Yeah.
Is it always a female that's doing it?
So in those passages, but if we change to if we turn to chapter 4, how beautiful you are, my love, how very beautiful. Your eyes are doves behind your veils. Your hair is like a flock of goats moving down the slopes of Gilead. Your teeth are like a flock of shorn ewes that have come up from the washing, all of which bear twins, and not one among them is bereaved. Your lips are like a crimson thread, and your mouth is lovely. Your cheeks are like halves of pomegranate behind your veil. Your neck is like the Tower of David, built in courses. On it hangs 1,000 bucklers, all of them shields of warriors. Your breasts are like 2 fawns, twins of gazelles that feed among the lilies.
The spell has been broken.
The spell has been broken.
I think the woman did a little better.
I think the woman did a little bit better, yes. Yeah.
A little over the top.
A little over the top. Yes, indeed. Yeah, there's, yeah. Patty?
It is over the top. I mean, wow. However, in essence, is the message to us that it's okay, it's acceptable. However, we don't have to go that far to elaborate about our law. I mean,
Right. So yes, some of the language is over the top. This is poetry. Remember, it's pushing the image and the feeling a bit. And when you are in love, don't you feel a little over the top at times? Don't you end up saying things that other people would find, markedly untrue because you see that person through the eyes of love? Marty?
If you're gonna stay married, you're gonna have to put up with a lot. You're gonna have to look at a lot of things with blind eyes. You're gonna have to accept a lot of things. I mean, it's a total commitment, and there's no getting around that. It's not all roses and perfume. You know what I mean?
Right.
You have to work at it,
Yeah.
and if that's what it takes.
Yeah, and so marriage is definitely a lot of work. I mean, in order to get the roses to grow, you have to spread some manure. In order to get the roses to bloom, you have to spread some manure. And so you can listen to this, and we recognize this is sort of that moment of passion, that place that starts. But it's more than that. That passion that we found in our romances and our, partnerships is also that thing that sort of is banked and can hold us through in those harder times. Because yes, there's always those compromises, always those points that things are hard. They come along, and it takes work. But this can also help that sense of connection and passion.
Then that means that a real true relationship, there's a lot of strength to it, and so, it's just not trivial, which maybe is a message that should go out to younger people and so forth, when you consider, divorce rates and all this.
Yeah.
Do they really truly know what they're going into?
Yeah, I mean, a relationship has that love and passion is there, and it has to be married with commitment. Because those two things work together. Now, this doesn't go into that. You have Proverbs that talks about, a resourceful wife is more to be desired than, tons of gold. I mean, there's that recognition that it's not just about the passion, but the passion is there. And if we end up using the metaphor that, that early Christians used to, the allegory to interpret this, it also shows Christ's passion for us, Christ's love for our souls, that he is coming and finding that sense of connection, of love, of rapture, of, euphoria. I mean, it's some of the, not early, but some of that, mystic, monastic writing, like Teresa of Avila, of, the what is it, the castle of the soul, the inner castle, yeah. So anyway, but there's this idea of that deep connection, and so they would read this and think about that deep connection that they have to God in Christ. So
You're gonna preach on that?
I am going to preach on this. That's exactly why I'm doing it. Yeah, we'll see what it's going to be PG, I promise. But yeah, no, that's a week from Sunday. This will be July 9th. Yes, exactly. Exactly. So chapter 7. How graceful are your feet in sandals, O queenly maiden. Your rounded thighs are like jewels, the work of a master hand. Your navel is a rounded bowl that never lacks mixed wine. Your belly is a heap of wheat encircled with lilies. Again, your two breasts are like two fawns, twins of gazelles. Your neck is like an ivory tower. I mean, so I mean, this is not.
It's not funny.
It is funny. It is funny, and no wonder the guy had so many wives. Yeah, there's definitely an interest in breasts. You are stately as a palm tree, and your breasts are like its clusters. I mean, there's just all kinds of stuff like that. So when we end up listening to it, again, the idea is, how do Christians in the first century, in the second century, interpret this? Now, if we turn to chapter 8, we have verse 6 through verse 6 and 7. Set me as a seal upon your heart, as a seal upon your arm, for love is strong as death, passion fierce as the grave. Its flashes are flashes of fire, a raging flame. Many waters cannot quench love, neither can floods drown it. If one offered for love all the wealth of his house, it would be utterly scorned. That is a sentiment to hold on to. That summarizes essentially the entire book. Now, of course, verse 8, we have a little sister and she has no breasts. I mean, we slip right out of it, but there's still those little pieces along the way, those things that remind us about love, about passion, about that sense of connection. And thinking about love is one thing that helps us truly live. So, anyway.
You kind of skimmed over chapter 9 and verse 4.
Chapter 9?
Chapter 4, verse 9.
Chapter 4, verse
You
9.
have ravished my heart, my sister, my bride. You have ravished my heart with the glance of your eyes, the one jewel of your necklace. How sweet. I mean, this is really pretty heavy stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Your lips distill nectar, my bride. Honey and milk are under your tongue.
The scent of your garments is like the scent of Lebanon. Yeah. Yeah. So, Folks feel like reading this to someone at at night. It could be interesting. See what Natalie thinks of it. Let's read the Bible together.
She's not in that mood.
Yeah. Yeah, the hospital really does put a damper on things. So anyway, we've got another 10 minutes, but I wanted to give you an overview, because this only shows up once in the lectionary text. I think you can understand why it only shows up once in the lectionary text over 3 years. But I do think as we look at the entirety of the biblical witness, we need to pay attention that this is included in there. Some of it seems silly, some of it seems profound, and when we start to look at how people have interpreted it over the years, it just reminds us that, yes, we can talk about this being about God, about Jesus and the soul, but it's also about that sense of individual connection, which is so important.
How many years ago?
It's not clear how long ago this was written down. I'm just looking here if there's any notes. It would be somewhere in the first millennia BCE. Somewhere probably in the 1000 BCE, maybe a little bit even earlier than that, 1200 BCE. But again, it's the way that things are put together. Exactly who wrote it isn't clear. I mean, it's been attributed to Solomon, but that isn't I mean, there's mention of Solomon, but it never has the first verse, chapter 1, verse 1 says the Song of Songs, which is Solomon's. So it's attributed. I mean, if we remember back to the Psalms, there are some that say of David or to David or from David or for David. I mean, quite honestly, that word David could be a title rather than a proper name, because David means beloved. If you heard me say what was on my engagement ring was why am I blanking on it? But it's Ladodi. No, but David means beloved, and it's just based on the vowel pointing, which got put in later. Ani Ladodi Vadodi Li. That's it. Ani, I to my beloved, and Dodi, which is beloved, Li to me. So yeah, that superscription of the Song of Songs or Canticle of Canticles, which is Solomon's, has been said, okay, well, this is attributed to Solomon.
It's actually called the Song of Solomon.
Yeah, well, it can be. I mean, my Bible calls it the Song of Solomon, but I do prefer the Song of Songs, simply because it's not definite to be Solomon's. Yeah,
What
but
do you think, Bill? I mean, this kind of talks about one man and one woman,
mm-hmm,
but then you guys had multiple wives.
right.
The
Yeah, absolutely. Which one are you talking about? Which wife are you talking about? No, it's me. No, it's me. No, it's me. I mean, yeah, with Solomon, I mean, he had, many wives and concubines, and, but here it does feel like this is, a sense of one-on-one connection, passion, man and woman. I mean, that's,
And the beauty of that,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, there is absolute beauty in the way that this plays out. Not so much, being compared to a date palm in its clusters, but, or your, teeth like, you or like lambs, who've been shorn coming up out of the water. But, I mean, for that time, those were images that were all around. We would go in a different direction. But yeah.
Maybe our direction would be worse.
Maybe our direction would be worse. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely points that a little bit more vulgar in our broader culture. Yeah, but there's still that connection and take on what on what things, on those images that come along. Let's see. Yeah, so there's also, so chapter 5, verse 10 and following. So here's some words about the man. My beloved is all radiant and ruddy, distinguished among 10,000. His head is the finest gold. His locks are wavy, black as a raven. His eyes are like doves beside springs of water, bathed in milk, fitly set. His cheeks are like beds of spices, yielding fragrance. His lips are lilies, distilling liquid myrrh. His arms are rounded gold, set with jewels. His body is ivory work, encrusted with sapphires. His legs are alabaster columns set upon bases of gold. His appearance is like Lebanon, choice as the cedars. His speech is most sweet, and he is altogether desirable. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem. That's a little bit more realistic, that you have legs of alabaster. Your body is ivory work encrusted with sapphire. Your cheeks are like beds of spices, and lips are like lilies distilling myrrh. Yeah, Locks are wavy and black like a raven. So, yeah. So the men get a little bit of time there too. So, anyway, yeah. So I am going to talk about that sense of connection and human love. Also going to talk about this as similar, that this is a reflection of God's love for us. Human love is a reflection of God's love. I mean, we all affirm that.
don't smile when you do it because you're gonna lose it.
I'm not going to be reading into, I'm not going to be reading into that verse where we started thinking about, yeah. But I do want the rest of the congregation to have that. So yes, the rest of the congregation needs to hear this as well. So anyway, Pete Haskins will be preaching on Sunday. I think he's preaching on Corinthians passage. I'm not remembering exactly what, but the lectionary texts were absolutely miserable. He could have preached on the binding of Isaac. No way. That's not easy to preach on. Or it was something else from Matthew that was sort of like, forget it. So anyway, so Pete will be here on Sunday doing communion, and we will, it's Communion Sunday. So first Sunday of the month, bring a little bit of extra food, stick it in the bin out there, and we'll be good to go. So, yeah.
I've been so concerned or thinking so much about, we've had that tragedy of the implosion.
Yeah, of the sub.
And last night I heard an interview of the widow of the man and the boy
Mm-hmm.
who passed away. She was going to go, and he begged because he wanted to do the Rubik's Cube at the bottom and set a record,
For the Rubik's Cube. Okay.
And so she conceded.
Mm.
And I just have thought, it's just mind-boggling.
Yeah.
The role, how she must be.
Yeah. Yeah, that sense of loss when a child dies and a husband dies, that it could have been her. Yeah. Patty?
We wish you luck. in
Thanks.
Texas.
Thanks.
We will be thinking of you, and we'll probably have the image of water.
Pouring all over me.
That
That it might help.
Yeah, but the rocket would bring down a shower.
Yeah, I'm not. The only problem is the rocket that Lauren is launching. A shower would include eggs, and so we really don't need that, because the idea is that you launch it 3 times and the egg stays intact. So, anyway, yeah.
Where does she test this?
She has they have a couple of different locations. One is out by the Outlet Mall in Johnson Creek. They have a big field there. And the other is down at Bong Recreation Area near Kenosha. They actually have a significant area there to launch. Yep, it was supposed to be an air base. And so there's places that they can launch easily from. So, shall we have our benediction and, see each other in 2 weeks? May the Lord watch between me and thee while we are absent one from the other. Thank you, friends.